choking on a fly. In 1159, Pope Adrian IV sat in his private chambers at the Vatican. He was the only Englishman ever to hold the highest position in the Catholic Church, a position of immense spiritual and political power across medieval Europe. For weeks, he had been suffering from a severe case of tonsillitis, which had caused uncomfortable swelling and pus buildup in his throat. The condition made swallowing painful and speaking difficult, but the Pope's duties could not wait. That evening, as was his custom, Adrian called for wine to be brought to him. The silver goblet arrived, filled with dark red liquid. Unbeknownst to the Pope or his servants, a small black fly had fallen into the wine and floated on its surface. Adrian raised the goblet to his lips and took a deep swallow. The liquid rushed down his throat, carrying the insect with it. Within seconds, the Pope began to cough violently. The fly had lodged itself in his already inflamed throat. The combination of the insect and the thick pus created a sudden and complete blockage of his airway. His face reddened as he gasped desperately for breath. Servants rushed to his side, but none knew how to help as he clutched at his throat. The Pope's body fought for oxygen. His lungs burned. His vision began to blur as oxygen deprivation set in. Each attempted breath produced only a weak, strained wheeze. Blood vessels in his eyes burst from the strain of coughing. His knees buckled. After just 3 minutes without air, Pope Adrian IV collapsed to the stone floor. By the time his personal physician arrived, Adrian's lips had turned blue. His body was still. The most powerful religious figure in Western Christendom, the man who had crowned Emperor Frederick Barbarossa and placed England under interdict, had been defeated not by political rivals or assassins, but by an insignificant fly and his own infected throat. The doorframe assassin. On April 7, 1498, King Charles VIII of France moved through the Château d'Amboise, his royal residence in the Loire Valley. The 27-year-old monarch had just finished watching a tennis match in the castle grounds and was in good spirits. Charles had ruled France for 14 years, leading military campaigns into Italy and establishing French influence across Europe. He was known for his ambition and drive, despite his small stature and reportedly unattractive appearance. That afternoon, Charles was taking his queen, Anne of Brittany, to watch another game. The royal couple walked through the castle's winding corridors, Charles moving at his characteristically quick pace. As they approached a gallery connecting to the castle's outer buildings, Charles accelerated his steps. The passageway was ancient, built in an era when doorways were constructed for people of much shorter height. Charles entered the gallery at full stride. His attention was fixed on his destination, not on the path ahead. The stone doorframe loomed just 5 feet above the ground, far too low for a man walking upright. Before anyone could warn him, the king's forehead struck the solid stone lintel with devastating force. The impact immediately fractured his skull. Charles stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock. Blood began to flow from the wound as he collapsed onto the stone floor. The king's body convulsed as his brain swelled against the broken bone. His breathing became irregular, each inhale more labored than the last. Courtiers rushed to his side. Physicians were summoned, but they could do nothing to stop the internal bleeding and swelling inside his skull. The king drifted in and out of consciousness for several hours. He could not speak, his eyes unable to focus on the faces around him. By evening, Charles VIII, King of France, conqueror of Naples, was dead, killed not in battle or by assassination, but by a simple doorway in his own castle. Road accident. In 1131, Prince Philip of France rode through the streets of Paris. The 15-year-old had been crowned co-king just 2 years earlier at his father's insistence. King Louis VI adored his eldest son and heir, seeing in him the future of France. But many in the royal court had a different opinion. Chronicles from the time described the young prince as arrogant and impulsive, traits that would play a role in the events about to unfold. It was late afternoon when Philip and his small entourage entered the city suburbs. The prince rode ahead on his magnificent white stallion, a gift from his father. The streets were narrow and crowded, lined with wooden buildings and filled with the usual chaos of medieval city life. Merchants shouted their wares, children played in the mud, and animals wandered freely between carts and passers-by. Near a dunghill at the edge of a filthy alleyway, a large black pig suddenly darted into the road. The animal moved with surprising speed, its hooves clattering on the cobblestones. Philip's horse had no time to react. The stallion's front legs collided with the pig's body at full gallop. The impact was immediate and violent. The horse stumbled forward, its momentum throwing it off balance. Philip, caught unprepared, was launched from his saddle. His body hurtled through the air before striking a large stone at the roadside. The impact broke multiple ribs, driving bone fragments into his lungs. As Philip lay stunned, his panicked horse fell sideways, crashing down onto the prince's chest with its full weight. The force crushed his sternum and remaining ribs. Blood filled his punctured lungs as he gasped for air. His attendants rushed to pull the horse away, but the damage was catastrophic. Prince Philip, heir to the French throne, died there in the mud of a Paris street, his royal blood mixing with the filth of the road. The diabolical pig that had caused the accident had already disappeared back into the alley, leaving behind a kingdom in sudden crisis. Fell to his death. On March 1st, 1244, Gruffydd ap Llywelyn ap Iorwerth stood at the window of his cell in the White Tower. The Welsh prince had been imprisoned for months by King Henry III of England, held as a political hostage to ensure his father's compliance with English demands. Gruffydd was a proud man, known for his fierce temper and refusal to accept captivity. The stone walls of the tower had become unbearable to him, a constant reminder of his lost freedom. That night, after months of careful planning, Gruffydd was ready to attempt his escape. For weeks, he had been secretly tearing his bed sheets into strips and braiding them together to form a makeshift rope. The guards changed shifts at midnight, giving him a brief window when attention would be divided. The Welsh prince tied one end of his sheet rope to a beam near the window and tossed the other end out into the darkness. It dangled against the White Tower's exterior wall, stretching toward the ground 90 feet below. Gruffydd was a large man, heavily built from years of warfare. He squeezed through the narrow window opening and began his descent, gripping the fabric tightly. The night air was cold against his face as he lowered himself down the tower's stone face. He had descended about 15 feet when the strain became too much. The braided sheets, unable to support his considerable weight, began to fray. The rope snapped with a sickening tearing sound. For a fraction of a second, Gruffydd hung suspended in the air. Then gravity took hold. His body plummeted through the darkness, picking up speed with every foot of the fall. There was no time to cry out before he struck the ground head first. The impact shattered his skull and broke his neck instantaneously. His body contorted at an impossible angle. Guards heard the thud and rushed to find the prince's broken form sprawled at the tower's base, the torn sheets still clutched in his lifeless hands. Gruffydd's bid for freedom had ended in the most permanent captivity of all. Poisoned himself accidentally. In June 1277, Sultan Baybar sat in his opulent tent outside Damascus. The 55-year-old ruler had transformed the Mamluk Sultanate into the dominant power in the region through military brilliance and ruthless political maneuvering. Born a slave, he had risen to become the most feared leader in the Middle East, defeating both Crusader armies and Mongol invaders. Baybars was not a man who left matters of power to chance. That evening, he hosted a banquet for an Ayyubid prince who controlled territories Baybars coveted. The Sultan had spent weeks planning this meeting down to the smallest detail. As servants brought forth dishes of lamb, rice, and sweets, Baybars prepared to execute his scheme. He had secretly obtained a powerful poison, undetectable in food or drink. When the time seemed right, Baybars poured 2 goblets of kumis, a fermented mare's milk drink. With practiced sleight of hand, he added the poison to 1 cup, intending it for his guest. Before he could complete his plan, a messenger arrived with urgent news from Cairo. Baybars stepped away to speak with the man, leaving both goblets on the table. During his absence, a well-meaning servant noticed the cups were not full and topped them both off with fresh kumis. The diluted poison was now present in both drinks. When Baybars returned, he grabbed what he believed was his safe goblet and drank deeply. The slightly bitter taste didn't register as unusual until moments later. The first symptoms appeared within minutes. His throat began to burn, followed by violent stomach cramps that doubled him over. Sweat broke out across his forehead as he realized what had happened. The Sultan collapsed, his body convulsing as the poison attacked his nervous system. Vomit mixed with blood spilled from his mouth onto the ornate carpet. His own physicians tried desperately to induce vomiting to purge the poison, but it was too late. The man who had survived countless battles and assassination attempts died writhing in agony, killed by his own scheme. Killed by an arrow. On August 2nd, 1100, King William II of England rode through the dense undergrowth of the New Forest. The 44-year-old monarch, known as William Rufus for his ruddy complexion, was passionate about hunting. He had ruled England for 13 years after succeeding his father, William the Conqueror. That summer day, he led a small hunting party including his younger brother Henry and several nobles, among them Sir William Tyrrell, a skilled archer known for his marksmanship. The hunting party spread out through the forest, tracking a magnificent stag. The air was thick with anticipation as they closed in on their prey. William II positioned himself in a clearing, bow ready, waiting for the animal to emerge from the trees. Sir Tyrrell stood some distance away, his own bow drawn, eager to impress his king with a difficult shot. The stag burst from the undergrowth, its antlers cutting through low branches as it fled. Tyrrell released his arrow, a shot meant to bring down the animal from a considerable distance. The arrow flew true, but fate had other plans. The shaft struck a tree branch, then ricocheted off the stag's antlers, changing its deadly trajectory. The deflected arrow hurtled toward the king. Before anyone could shout a warning, the broadhead point struck William directly in the chest with tremendous force. The arrow penetrated his ribcage and pierced his heart. The king gasped, dropping his own bow as he looked down in disbelief at the shaft protruding from his body. Blood quickly soaked William's hunting tunic as he stumbled backward. He collapsed to his knees, then fell face first onto the forest floor. His companions rushed to his side, but the king was beyond help. The arrow had severed major blood vessels. With each weakening heartbeat, more blood filled his chest cavity. William II of England, son of the Conqueror, died within minutes, his blood seeping into the forest soil. His brother Henry, rather than staying with the body, rode immediately to Winchester to secure the royal treasury, ensuring his own swift succession to the throne, killed by his own revenge. In 892, Sigurd Eysteinsson rode across the northern highlands of Scotland. Known as Sigurd the Mighty, he was the second Norse Earl of Orkney and a feared Viking warrior who had conquered much of northern Scotland. His latest campaign had brought him face to face with his longtime rival, Maelbrigte the Bucktooth, a Pictish chieftain who controlled neighboring territories. The two had arranged to meet for negotiations, each agreeing to bring only 40 men. But Sigurd, cunning and ruthless, had mounted 2 men on each horse to double his forces. When the parties met, Maelbrigte immediately recognized the deception. A battle ensued, short and brutal. Sigurd's superior numbers prevailed, and Maelbrigte fell under the Norse blades. For Sigurd, simple victory was not enough. He wanted to humiliate his enemy even in death. Taking his sword, the Earl severed Maelbrigte's head from his body with a single powerful stroke. The head, with its distinctive protruding tooth, would become Sigurd's trophy. He tied it to his saddle by its long hair, letting it hang as a warning to all who would oppose him. As Sigurd rode toward Orkney, the severed head bounced against his leg with each step of his horse. The prominent bucktooth that had given Maelbrigte his nickname scraped repeatedly against Sigurd's calf, creating a small cut. The Earl paid no attention to the minor wound, focusing instead on his triumphant return. Within days, the scratch became inflamed. The skin around it reddened and began to swell as infection set in. Bacteria from the dead man's mouth entered Sigurd's bloodstream. Fever followed, along with increasing pain. The leg turned hot to the touch, with red streaks extending upward toward his torso. Despite efforts by his healers, the infection spread rapidly. Sigurd's body burned with fever as the sepsis overtook him. Within a week of the battle, the mighty Earl lay delirious in his bed, his body poisoned by the very trophy he had claimed. Sigurd the Mighty died in agony, killed by the revenge of a dead man's tooth.